Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you work, money just slips through your fingers? Like you're running on a treadmill, sweating, striving, but never moving forward? I've been there, and I discovered something. There's only one formula to tap into wealth that doesn't run dry. It's not in the stock market. It's not in some secret investment. It's in the divine supply. Think of the ocean. It's vast, endless. You can scoop out buckets, but it never runs out. That's how divine supply works. It's God's abundance. Infinite. Limitless. But here's the twist. Most of us come to this ocean with a tiny cup. We ask for just enough to get by, just enough to pay bills, just enough to survive. And then we wonder why we're not thriving. The formula is simple. Faith plus gratitude plus action equals divine wealth. Faith is believing in unseen abundance. It's knowing that opportunities exist even when you can't see them yet. When a farmer plants seeds, he doesn't cry over an empty field. He knows deep down that the harvest is coming. That's faith. And when you believe in divine supply, you stop chasing lack and start attracting provision. Gratitude is the magnet. When you're thankful for the little, you make room for the big. Have you noticed how some people keep complaining, I don't have enough? And guess what? They never have enough. But when you thank God for even the smallest coin, you're opening a bigger channel for blessings to flow. Gratitude multiplies what you have. And then comes action. Faith and gratitude without action are like a car without fuel. God supplies the opportunities, but you must move your feet. Think of a fisherman. He prays for a catch. He thanks God for the ocean, but he still has to cast the net. That's action. Divine wealth flows when your hands are ready to work. And here's the beauty of it. When you combine these three, faith, gratitude, and action, you unlock a flow of abundance that no economy can stop. No recession. No crisis. Because your supply isn't from the world. It's from above. A young man once told me he wanted to start a small business. He had little money, but he had faith. Every night, he thanked God for opportunities. And every day he worked on his idea, step by step. Within a year, he was not only debt-free, but hiring others. What changed? Not his bank balance at first. His mindset. He tapped into divine supply. So I ask you, what cup are you bringing to the ocean? A teaspoon or a bucket? Because abundance is already waiting. The formula is simple. Faith, gratitude, action. Repeat it. Live it, believe it, and watch how divine supply makes you rich, not just in money, but in peace, joy, and purpose. Here are some key points related to this divine supply is limitless, like an ocean. It never runs dry. Your mindset matters. Stop approaching life with a teaspoon when a bucket is available. Faith is a foundation, believing in abundance before it appears. Gratitude multiplies wealth by opening channels for more blessings. Action activates provision. Faith and gratitude alone aren't enough without effort. The formula, faith plus gratitude plus action equals divine wealth. Faith is believing in unseen abundance. It is a quiet voice inside that whispers, there's more for you, even when your bank account tells a different story. It is the invisible bridge that carries you across the gap between where you are and where you dream of being. Think of a farmer walking across his land. The soil looks dry. The sky seems stubborn. He plants seed after seed into the ground, and if you watch him from the outside, you might even call him foolish. Why pour precious seeds into the dirt when there's no sign of rain? Yet he smiles as he covers each row, because he knows something deeper than the weather report. He knows that the harvest is already hidden inside the soil, waiting for the right moment to burst forth. That's faith. It doesn't see lack. It sees potential disguised as emptiness. Have you ever walked through a season where everything felt barren? Where no opportunities seemed to knock and every door stayed locked? Maybe you applied for jobs and never got a call back. Maybe you tried business after business and they all failed. Maybe you prayed, but the silence felt louder than your words. In those moments, most people give up. They say, this is proof I'm not meant to succeed. But faith says something else. Faith says, this is proof that something is about to change. Faith sees the closed doors and believes a better door is being carved just for you. I once met a man who told me about the hardest season of his life. He had lost his job, his house was almost taken away, and his friends started to avoid him because he couldn't keep up with their lifestyles. He said he sat in his car one night with only a few dollars in his pocket and whispered, "God, I don't see how this turns around." And then he told me something that shook me. He felt a deep peace come over him, almost like a warm blanket wrapping around his chest. It didn't solve his problems that night. It didn't fill his bank account, but it gave him enough strength to wake up the next morning and try again. He told me, "That was the night I learned what faith feels like. It doesn't erase reality, but it changes how you see it." Within a year, he found a new job, started a side business, and eventually bought back his home. He laughed when he said, "The supply was always there. I just had to believe long enough to receive it." That's a secret most people miss. Faith doesn't demand proof. Faith creates proof. It's like a child standing by the window, staring at the driveway because their father promised to bring them ice cream. They don't pace the room in doubt. They don't ask, "What if he forgets?" They wait with wide eyes, certain the sound of the car is coming. That's the energy of faith. It lives in expectation, and expectation pulls miracles into reality. When you live in faith, you start to notice opportunities where others only see obstacles. Imagine two people walking down the same street. One sees a rundown shop and mutters, "This place is hopeless." The other sees the same shop and whispers, "This could be a cafe, a bookstore, a new beginning." Same environment, different vision. Faith gives you lenses that reveal hidden treasure in plain sight. There's a line I once heard that stuck with me. Faith is seeing light with your heart when your eyes only see darkness. Think about how powerful that is. When the world screams recession, faith whispers expansion. When the doctor gives a diagnosis, faith whispers healing. When your family history is filled with struggle, faith whispers breakthrough. It doesn't ignore the facts. It simply believes there is a greater truth beyond the facts. A woman I knew used to keep a small journal of promises she made to herself. Each page had a sentence that began with, "I believe." One said, "I believe I will be debt-free." Another said, "I believe my children will go to college." At the time, her paycheck barely covered rent. She could have written, "I believe I'll survive." But she dared to write bigger dreams. Years later, she pulled that same journal out and smiled because almost every line had come to pass. Not by magic, not overnight, but because she carried faith through every storm until the seeds began to bloom. Faith works like a muscle. If you never exercise it, it feels weak. If you train it daily, it grows stronger. That's why small acts of belief matter. Waking up and declaring, "Today will bring opportunities." Smiling even when your pockets are empty. Speaking life into your vision before anyone else sees it. Every act is like lifting weights for your spirit. And over time, faith becomes so strong that nothing can break it. Picture a mountain climber standing at the base of an enormous peak. The summit looks unreachable. The rocks look sharp. The air seems thin. Most people would say, "It's impossible." But the climber takes one step, then another, trusting that the path will reveal itself with each move. That's faith. It doesn't demand a full map. It just trusts the next step. And somehow, by the end, the climber is standing on top, looking down at the very mountain that once felt unbeatable. Faith also requires courage. It's not always comfortable to believe in what others can't see. People might call you unrealistic, naive, even foolish. Noah was laughed at while building an ark on dry land. Imagine the voices mocking him. "Where's the rain, Noah?" Yet his faith kept hammering the wood until the flood came. The ones who laughed ended up wishing they had believed too. Faith often makes you look wrong before it proves you right. So the question is, what are you believing for right now? Do you believe you can step out of debt? Do you believe you can create something that blesses others? Do you believe you can rise above the limits your family faced? Or are you only believing what you see in front of you? Because sight is limited. Faith is limitless. Every great breakthrough begins with someone who dared to believe before they had the evidence. The Wright brothers believed humans could fly when the world said it was impossible. Thomas Edison believed light could come from a bulb after failing over 1,000 times. Nelson Mandela believed in freedom when prison walls told him otherwise. Faith is the seed behind every revolution, every invention, every miracle story. And here's the beauty. Faith isn't something only special people have. It's already inside you. It's in every dream you carry. It's in every time your heart tells you, keep going. It's in the way you still wake up hoping for better days. Even after disappointment, that hope is faith in disguise, quietly reminding you that abundance is still waiting. The real question is whether you'll water it or starve it, whether you'll speak life or death over it, whether you'll trust the unseen ocean of supply, or keep staring at your empty cup in despair. Because faith, when nurtured, becomes a key that unlocks divine abundance, a supply so vast it could never run out, and it waits for the one who dares to believe. Gratitude is the magnet that pulls abundance closer. It is more than saying thank you when something good happens. It is a way of seeing, a way of breathing, a way of living that transforms even the smallest moments into treasures. Imagine waking up in a small room, no luxury, no riches, just sunlight peeking through the curtain. Most people would sigh, complaining about what they don't have. But someone with gratitude would smile and whisper, "Thank you for another day." And that small whisper changes everything, because a heart shifts from lack to fullness, from despair to possibility, from emptiness to abundance. I once spoke to a woman who grew up in poverty. She said she remembered nights when dinner was nothing more than bread soaked in water. Her mother, instead of crying, would light a small candle and tell her children, "Look, tonight we have a feast of light." They would sit around the table, laughing, pretending the candlelight was a chandelier in a palace. The food never changed, but the spirit did. Years later, that woman told me, "I learned that gratitude turns crumbs into a banquet." She went on to build her own successful business, but she said her true wealth had been formed long before the money came, when she learned to give thanks for even the smallest blessings. Gratitude works like a mirror. Whatever you focus on reflects back to you. Complain about what's missing, and you'll see only emptiness. Appreciate what you have, and you'll start noticing more to be thankful for. That's why some people with millions still feel poor, while others with very little live as though they own the world. Gratitude isn't about how much you hold in your hands. It's about how much you see with your heart. Think about the people in your life. We all know someone who never seems satisfied. They get a raise, but they complain it isn't enough. They buy a car, but the neighbor's car is shinier. They live in a cycle of never enough, because their eyes are locked on what's missing. Contrast that with the person who beams with joy over the simplest things. The smell of coffee in the morning, a smile from a stranger, the sound of rain on the window. Which of those two people do you think attracts more opportunities, more kindness, more favor? Gratitude draws blessings like a magnet. It multiplies what you already have until you realize you've been living in abundance all along. I remember a young man who once told me about a time he was drowning in debt. Bills piled on his table like mountains, and every day felt heavier. Instead of cursing his situation, he made a bold decision. Every night, before he went to bed, he listed 3 things he was grateful for. Some nights, it was as simple as, "I'm grateful for this bed. I'm grateful I can breathe. I'm grateful I'm still alive." Slowly, something changed. He said his mind became lighter. He stopped feeling trapped. He started noticing opportunities he had overlooked before. Within 2 years, he had cleared his debt. He laughed as he said, "The money didn't show up because of magic. It showed up because gratitude freed my eyes to see solutions I couldn't see when I was blinded by complaints." Gratitude shifts energy. Picture walking into a room where someone is complaining loudly about work, about life, about people. The air feels heavy, doesn't it? Now picture walking into a room where someone is thankful, smiling, speaking words of appreciation. The air feels lighter, almost inviting. That is the power of gratitude. It not only transforms your inner world, but changes the atmosphere around you, drawing others, drawing opportunities, drawing abundance. There's a story about 2 prisoners sitting in a dark cell. One stares at the mud on the floor and curses his fate. The other looks up through the bars and marvels at the stars in the sky. Both men are in the same place, but their experience is completely different. Gratitude doesn't erase the mud. It simply shifts your gaze toward the stars. Someone once asked me, "But how can I be grateful when I'm struggling?" And I told them, gratitude is not about denying your struggle. It's about finding light in the middle of it. Gratitude doesn't mean you ignore pain. It means you decide pain will not be the only story you tell. Even in loss, there can be gratitude for memories. Even in failure, gratitude for lessons. Even in emptiness, gratitude for the hope that better days are possible. I once read about a man who survived a terrible accident that left him unable to walk. At first, he fell into despair. But one morning, as he sat outside, he heard birds singing. For the first time since his accident, he smiled and thought, "At least I can still hear this." That small thought of gratitude became his anchor. Day by day, he started noticing more: the warmth of sunlight, the taste of food, the laughter of friends. He later said, "Gratitude saved me before medicine ever did." His body may not have fully recovered, but his soul did, and he lived with joy that inspired everyone around him. Gratitude also multiplies relationships. A simple "thank you" has the power to strengthen bonds. Think of the last time someone truly appreciated you. Didn't it make you want to give more, love more, help more? Gratitude invites people to stay in your life. In the same way, when you show gratitude to God, to life, to the universe for what you already have, it's as if abundance itself says, "I want to give you more." There's a verse that says, "To those who are faithful with little, more will be given." Gratitude is that faithfulness. When you honor the little, you are entrusted with the much. When you ignore the little, even the much slips away. That's why wealthy people without gratitude often end up miserable, while those with almost nothing but gratitude radiate joy. One of the most powerful practices I've ever seen is a gratitude jar. A friend of mine started writing one thing he was thankful for on a slip of paper each day and placing it in a jar. At the end of the year, he opened the jar and read them aloud. He said it moved him to tears because he realized how many beautiful moments he would have forgotten if he hadn't recorded them. He told me, "I thought I had an ordinary year, but when I read those slips, I realized it was extraordinary." Gratitude doesn't just change the future. It redeems the past and illuminates the present. So when I say gratitude is a magnet, I mean it literally pulls the good toward you. A grateful heart opens a flow of divine supply because it signals readiness, openness, and humility. It says, "I see what I've been given and I value it." And when you value something, more is entrusted to you. The world responds to a grateful soul. People respond. Opportunities respond. Even the unseen responds. Gratitude is the alchemy that turns ordinary moments into miracles, small coins into abundance, pain into wisdom, and waiting into preparation. It is the practice that multiplies divine supply in your life, not by changing the amount you hold, but by changing the eyes with which you see it. Action is the spark that ignites everything. Without it, faith is only a dream and gratitude is only a feeling. It is the bridge between believing and receiving, between thanking and living. Imagine a fisherman standing on the shore. He prays for fish. He thanks God for the ocean. He feels hope in his heart. But unless he casts his net, the fish will never come to him. Action is the net. It is the proof that you are ready to receive what you've been praying for. I once met a man who said he spent years declaring that he would start a business. He told everyone about his vision, even wrote down his ideas. But every year passed with no movement. He was always waiting for the right time, and the right time never came. One day, after losing another job, he sat at his kitchen table and realized he had notebooks full of dreams but nothing to show for them. That was the day he finally took a step. He sold his old bicycle to raise enough money for supplies and began selling small items from his home. It was messy. It was imperfect, but it was action. Years later, his business grew into something stable. He said, "The hardest part wasn't the work. It was taking the first step." That's the truth for most of us. We overthink. We wait for clarity. We pray for doors to open, but forget that sometimes we're the ones who must turn the handle. Action isn't about knowing the entire path. It's about taking the next small step. Think of a person walking through the fog. They can only see a few feet ahead, but as they move forward, more of the path becomes clear. If they stand still, they remain in darkness. Movement creates vision. Faith and gratitude prepare the soil, but action plants the seed. Without planting, there can be no harvest. A farmer doesn't say, "I believe in a harvest," and then sit in the shade. He works the land, tills the soil, places each seed into ground, and waters it day after day. His hands get dirty, his back aches, but he keeps moving because he knows that action is what turns potential into reality. I remember hearing a story about a woman who dreamed of writing a book. She prayed for inspiration and thanked God for her gift, but for years she never wrote a single page. One morning she realized her dream would remain a dream unless she picked up the pen. She began writing one paragraph a day, no matter how busy she was. Some days the words flowed, other days they didn't. But after months of steady action, she had a complete manuscript. That book later reached thousands of readers. She told me, "The book didn't appear because I believed in it. It appeared because I worked for it." Action doesn't have to be dramatic. It just has to be consistent. Small steps compound. A man who saves $1 a day doesn't feel rich at first, but after years of action, he has built something substantial. A person who spends 15 minutes a day learning a skill may not notice progress in the beginning, but over time that steady action transforms him into an expert. Abundance responds to motion. It flows where there is movement. Stagnation repels it. There's a saying, "God feeds the birds, but he doesn't throw food into the nest." The bird must fly, search, and peck. The food is there, but it is action that finds it. In the same way, divine supply is abundant, but it requires your hands, your feet, your effort to draw it out. Action is proof of belief. You can tell me you have faith, but if you never move, it's not faith, it's a wish. True faith shows up in what you do. I once spoke to a young man who wanted to be a musician. He said he had talent, passion, and faith that God would make a way. But he never practiced, never recorded, never shared his songs. He waited for someone to discover him. Years later, he was still waiting. Compare that to another man I met who also dreamed of music. He worked construction during the day and played his guitar at night. He recorded songs in his small apartment with borrowed equipment. He uploaded them online, even when no one listened at first. Over time, people began to notice. His persistence opened doors to opportunities he never imagined. He said, "I prayed, I believed, but I also played until my fingers bled." That is action. Action is uncomfortable. It demands risk. It demands vulnerability. It demands that you step into the unknown, not knowing if you'll succeed or fail. But in that risk lies reward. Think of Peter stepping out of the boat to walk on water. The miracle didn't happen while he sat safely inside. It happened when he put his foot on the waves. Most people want miracles without movement, but movement is where the miracle meets you. Action also teaches lessons that waiting never will. You can study, plan, and prepare for years, but you won't learn as much as you will from actually doing. Failure itself is a teacher, guiding you toward the right path. Every successful person carries scars from failed actions, but those scars are proof they tried, proof they move, proof they believe enough to risk. Waiting feels safe, but it keeps you in the same place. Acting feels scary, but it carries you closer to your breakthrough. I think of the story of a man who sat by a river, praying for God to let him cross. He stayed there for years, waiting for the waters to part. One day, frustrated, he finally stepped into the river and discovered it was shallow enough to walk across the whole time. The supply was waiting. The answer was waiting. But it was action that revealed the way. How many of us are still sitting by rivers, waiting for miracles that require only one bold step? Even gratitude without action is incomplete. You can thank God for the gift of a new day, but if you spend that day in idleness, the gift is wasted. You can be grateful for your talents, but if you never use them, they remain buried. Gratitude honors the present. Action builds the future. Together, they create the flow of abundance. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history happened because someone decided to act when everyone else was still talking. The Wright brothers didn't just dream of flying. They built wings, tested, failed, and tested again. Thomas Edison didn't just hope for light. He created thousands of failed experiments before success. Each step was action. Each action drew him closer to what already existed in potential, but needed his hands to bring forth. The truth is, divine supply doesn't run out. The ocean of abundance is always full. But the size of your catch depends on the size of your net, and whether you are willing to cast it. Action is casting. Action is proof. Action is your declaration to heaven and earth that you are ready to receive what you have believed and what you have thanked for. Without it, abundance remains a story untold, a promise unopened, a seed unplanted. With it, everything begins to move. Gratitude multiplies what you have. It is not addition, it is multiplication. It takes something small and turns it into something abundant, not because the thing itself changes, but because your perspective unlocks new dimensions of value. Imagine standing in front of a small garden with only a few plants. Someone without gratitude might say, "This is all? Just a few leaves." But someone with gratitude looks at the same garden and says, "This is food. This is beauty. This is life." Suddenly the small becomes big. The little becomes much. Gratitude doesn't wait for abundance to show up. It creates abundance out of what is already here. I once met a man who told me a story of growing up in a poor neighborhood. His parents worked hard, but money was always tight. His mother would bring home simple meals, beans and rice most nights, and instead of complaining, she would gather the children and say, "Isn't it wonderful that we have enough to eat together?" He said he grew up never feeling poor, because his mother taught him that gratitude multiplied the value of what they had. Later in life, when he became wealthy, he realized it wasn't the money that made him rich. It was a gratitude that made even little things feel like treasure. He said, "When you learn to be grateful for beans and rice, a feast doesn't shock you. It simply feels like more of the same abundance." Have you ever noticed how complaining shrinks things? You could have a good job, a roof over your head, food on the table, but if you complain, it all feels small. You focus on what's missing, and suddenly what you have doesn't seem enough. But gratitude expands the same situation. A grateful heart sees a job as provision, the roof as shelter, the food as blessing. Nothing changed outside, but everything changed inside. That shift opens the door for more to come. There's a line I once heard, "What you appreciate appreciates." In other words, whatever you are grateful for increases in value. Think of a person in a relationship. If they constantly criticize their partner, even small flaws feel huge and the relationship weakens. But if they show gratitude for their partner, saying thank you, noticing small acts of kindness, the relationship grows stronger. The same applies to money, health, opportunities. Gratitude magnifies them, strengthens them, multiplies them. I recall a young woman who struggled financially while raising 2 children on her own. She told me she used to cry herself to sleep, feeling like life was unfair. Then one day, she decided to start writing down every blessing she could see. At first, the list was short. "My children are healthy. We have a place to sleep. We laughed at dinner tonight." But as days turned into weeks, her list grew longer. She said her circumstances didn't change immediately, but her spirit did. She stopped feeling empty. She felt full, even before anything external improved. Eventually, that shift in spirit gave her the energy to pursue new opportunities, and she built a stable career. Looking back, she said, "Gratitude turned my despair into fuel. It multiplied my strength until life itself multiplied my blessings." Gratitude multiplies not only possessions, but also peace. Imagine 2 men walking home. One focuses on the traffic, the noise, the long walk, and he arrives home drained. The other notices the sunset, the breeze on his face, the rhythm of his steps, and he arrives home refreshed. Same walk, different experience. Gratitude multiplied joy where there could have been only frustration. That is its quiet power. It takes what is ordinary and makes it extraordinary. Sometimes we think we need more to feel grateful, but the truth is the opposite. We need gratitude to feel like we have more. Have you ever seen children play with almost nothing? Sticks, stones, empty boxes, but laughing as though they were given the world? That is gratitude in its purest form. Meanwhile, children in wealthier homes surrounded by expensive toys sometimes cry, "I'm bored." Gratitude is not about the size of the gift, but the size of the heart receiving it. A friend once told me about his grandmother, who lived through war and famine. She had lost family members, lived through hunger, yet she was the most joyful person he had ever known. He asked her once, "How can you be so happy after all you've been through?" She smiled and said, "Because every day I wake up, I find something to thank God for. Some days it's only the fact that I can breathe, but that is enough." He told me her gratitude made her house feel like a palace. Even though it was small and modest, everyone who visited her left feeling richer, simply by being around her spirit. Think about money itself. Some people have little but are grateful, and somehow their money stretches further. Others have plenty but are ungrateful, and it always feels like it's not enough. Gratitude multiplies money not by magically creating more, but by opening your mind to manage it better, to attract opportunities, to see abundance rather than scarcity. When you are grateful for $1, you handle it with care, and in time that dollar grows into more. When you dismiss $1 as nothing, even 1,000 can feel like nothing. There's a story of a teacher who gave each student a small seed and told them to plant it in a pot. Some student complained, saying, "It's too small, it won't amount to anything." They neglected their pots, and nothing grew. Others cherished their seeds, watered them daily, and watched with gratitude as the first green shoots appeared. In time, those who cared with gratitude had beautiful plants, while the others had empty soil. Gratitude had multiplied what was given, not because the seeds were different, but because the attitude was different. When you live with gratitude, you stop focusing on what's missing and start focusing on what's present. That shift attracts more what you focus on. It's like tuning a radio. When you tune into gratitude, you begin to hear songs of abundance that others miss. Life responds to the signal you send out. A heart full of gratitude sends out the frequency of abundance, and abundance answers. Even in struggle, gratitude can multiply resilience. A man facing illness might feel broken if he focuses only on pain. But if he says, "I am thankful for one more day, for the love of my family, for the chance to fight," his strength multiplies. Gratitude multiplies courage. Gratitude multiplies hope. Gratitude multiplies faith. It is easy to overlook the small things: clean water, food, the ability to walk, to speak, to see. Millions in the world long for these simple gifts. When you stop and give thanks, you realize you are wealthier than you thought. And that realization changes how you live, how you give, how you love. Gratitude multiplies contentment until you no longer chase endlessly after what you don't have, because you finally see how much you already hold. Gratitude multiplies your capacity to receive. When you are grateful for the small, you create space for the greater. Life says, "If you honor this, I can trust you with more." Gratitude prepares you for expansion. It multiplies readiness. It multiplies your ability to handle the blessings that are waiting. Without gratitude, even if more comes, it slips away. With gratitude, more not only comes, it stays. So gratitude is not just a reaction, it is a force. It multiplies peace, joy, opportunities, relationships, and even material blessings. It is a soil in which abundance grows, the key that unlocks divine supply, the unseen law that makes little become much. Faith is not built in the sunshine. Faith is born in the storm. It is easy to believe when everything is smooth, when the bills are paid, when the body is strong, when the doors are open. But true faith shows its face when the lights go out, when the ground shakes, when every visible reason keep going disappears. That is where the real foundation of wealth begins. Not just financial wealth, but spiritual wealth, emotional wealth, and the courage to hold on when others let go. I once heard a story of a man who lost his business overnight. Years of work gone because of one unexpected crash. He said that night he walked the streets alone, his pockets empty but his mind racing. He had two choices: give in to fear or lean on faith. He whispered into the night, "If there is still breath in me, there must still be a way." That decision didn't put money in his hands right away, but it put fire back in his heart. Within months, he rebuilt. He said later, "It wasn't money that got me back on my feet. It was faith. Money follows faith, not the other way around. Faith is believing in what you can't yet see." Think of a farmer planting seeds. The soil swallows them. The ground looks empty, and for days there is no sign of life. But the farmer waters the ground, not because he sees proof, but because he believes the seed is alive beneath the surface. Wealth works the same way. Opportunities, dreams, ideas, they start invisible. Faith is the water you pour while the ground looks barren. Without it, nothing breaks through. Some people say, I'll believe it when I see it. But those who live by divine supply say, I'll see it because I believed it. That is the reversal faith demands. It is not logic, it is trust. It is saying, even though the storm rages, I trust the sun is still above the clouds. Faith doesn't deny reality. Faith redefines reality. It says, yes, the bank account is low, yes, the challenges are high, but I am not defined by what I see. I am defined by what I believe is possible. I remember a young man who wanted to start a small business. Everyone around him laughed. They said, you have no money, no degree, no chance. But he had faith. He borrowed books in the library, studied late nights, learned from mentors, and started selling his product from the trunk of his car. Years later, his company was thriving. When people asked him what made the difference, he didn't list strategies or investors. He said, the only thing I had at the beginning was faith. That was enough. Faith during hardship is like a candle in the dark. It doesn't remove the darkness, but it gives you enough light to take the next step. And when you take one step, then another, suddenly you realize the darkness doesn't stretch forever. That tiny flame of belief carries you until dawn arrives. The truth is, many people quit not because the dream was impossible, but because they lost faith in the dark. If they had kept their candle lit just a little longer, they would have seen the sunrise. Have you ever thought about how many of the world's greatest breakthroughs came out of hardship? Inventors, leaders, artists, all of them faced seasons where the world said impossible. Thomas Edison failed over 1,000 times before creating a working light bulb. When asked about his failures, he said, I have not failed. I've just found 1,000 ways that won't work. That is faith. Seeing failure not as the end, but as proof that success is still alive, waiting. Faith also requires trust beyond yourself. Sometimes divine supply doesn't look like what you expected. You might be praying for money, but the answer comes in the form of an idea. You might be hoping for a door to open, but the answer comes through a closed one that forces you onto a better path. Faith says, even if I don't understand this now, it is still working for my good. There was once a woman diagnosed with a serious illness. The doctors gave her little hope, but she chose faith over fear. Every morning, she spoke words of life over herself. I will not die. I will live. She surrounded herself with positivity, listened to uplifting messages, and held on even when her body felt weak. Slowly, she recovered. She later said that it was not only medicine that healed her, but the faith that gave her strength to keep fighting. Her story is a reminder that faith doesn't just change circumstances, it changes us. Hardship is a furnace where faith is refined. When gold is placed in fire, the impurities burn away, and what remains is pure. In the same way, challenges strip away illusions, leaving behind the core of who we really are. If you have faith only when things are easy, that is convenience, not faith. Real faith is proven when everything around you says quit, but your heart whispers, keep going. Think of it this way. A kite rises not with the wind, but against it. The resistance is what lifts it higher. In the same way, hardship can either break you or build you. With faith, it builds you. With fear, it breaks you. And the choice between faith and fear is one only you can make. Many people believe that divine supply is about waiting for miracles to drop into your lap. But faith is not passive. Faith is active. It is moving your feet even when you can't see the entire road. It is building the ark before the rain falls. It is showing up every day with a conviction that what you are sowing in secret will one day bloom in public. Sometimes faith requires patience longer than you want to endure. You might pray for months or years with no visible result. But faith says delay is not denial. Faith says the seed is still alive, even if it's beneath the soil. And when the harvest finally comes, you realize it was your faith during the drought that kept the seed alive. There's a quiet power in choosing to trust when there is no reason to. It confuses fear. It disarms doubt. It silences the voices that say you can't. And when you hold on to faith in hardship, you discover strength you didn't know you had. You discover provision you didn't expect. You discover that divine supply was never far away. It was waiting for the key of faith to unlock it. So when the storm comes, don't curse the rain. Stand in it. Believe through it. Hold your candle of faith high, even if your hands tremble. Because faith in hardship is not just about surviving the season. It is about positioning yourself for the harvest that comes after. The harvest only seen by those who refuse to let go of their belief when everything around them told them to. Generosity is the proof that you trust the source of your supply. When you hold on tightly, fearing you might lose what little you have, you live in scarcity. But when you're released with open hands, when you give even when it stretches you, you declare with your actions that your well will never run dry. Generosity is not about how much is in your pocket. It is about how much is in your heart. I once heard someone say, "You can give without loving, but you can never love without giving." That is the essence of divine wealth, an overflow that refuses to stay confined. There's a story of a woman who baked bread every morning. She was not rich. In fact, some days she wasn't sure she'd have enough for her own family. Yet she made it her habit to place an extra loaf by her window for anyone who might pass by hungry. Neighbors thought she was foolish. "What if you run out?" they asked. But she kept giving. Years later, when her own family faced a time of great need, people from all around the town came to her aid, bringing food, money, and help. One of them said, "You fed us when you had little. Now we will make sure you lack nothing." Her generosity had been like seeds planted in the ground, and in the moment of need, the harvest came back multiplied. Generosity carries a mysterious law within it. The more you give, the more room you create to receive. Imagine holding water in a clenched fist. It slips away quickly. But open your hand, let some flow out, and suddenly you can hold more. This is a paradox. What you release doesn't leave your life. It returns in unexpected ways. Sometimes not immediately. Sometimes not even in the same form, but it always comes back. I knew a young man who struggled to pay his bills. One evening, walking home, he saw a homeless person sitting in the cold. He felt something stir inside him and took the last $10 in his wallet and placed it in the man's hands. He told me later, "I didn't do it because I could afford it. I did it because I couldn't afford not to." A week later, he unexpectedly received a freelance job that paid more than 10 times that amount. Coincidence? Perhaps. But he believed it was proof that divine supply flows to those who trust enough to give. Generosity is also not just about money. It's about giving time, attention, kindness, forgiveness, encouragement. Sometimes the greatest wealth you can give costs nothing but your heart. A smile to someone who feels invisible. A word of encouragement to someone on the verge of giving up. A listening ear to someone carrying silent pain. These forms of generosity multiply in ways you may never see. You may not know how much your small act of kindness changes the trajectory of someone's day, or even their life. There was once a teacher who stayed after school each day to help struggling students, never asking for extra pay, simply giving her time because she believed in them. Years later, one of her students, now a successful business owner, tracked her down to say thank you. He said, "I was going to drop out, but your generosity kept me going. Everything I have today is because you gave when you didn't have to." She may have forgotten those afternoons, but her generosity lived on through him. That is the legacy of giving. It outlives the moment. Some people are afraid to give because they believe generosity will make them weaker. But in truth, it makes you stronger. It stretches your capacity to trust. It expands your vision of abundance. When you give, you tell yourself, "I have more than enough to share." That thought alone begins to shape your reality. You stop living with a clenched soul, and you start walking with an open spirit. I remember visiting a village once where resources were scarce. Yet the people were some of the most generous I had ever met. If you entered their home, even if they had only a small meal, they insisted on sharing it with you. They laughed, they celebrated, they gave freely. And here's the remarkable thing. Though by material standards they had little, they radiated a richness of spirit that many wealthy people lack. Their joy was multiplied through generosity. They proved that divine wealth has less to do with the size of your bank account and more to do with the size of your heart. Generosity also breaks the grip of fear. Fear says, if I give, I won't have enough. Faith-filled generosity says, if I give, it will return multiplied. And time after time, life proves the second voice right. Think of farmers again. If they hoard their seeds out of fear, nothing grows. But when they release the seeds into the soil, trusting the unseen process, they reap a harvest far greater than what they released. Generosity works the same way. There's a verse I once read that says, the world of the generous gets larger and larger. The world of the stingy gets smaller and smaller. Isn't that true? The stingy person lives in constant fear of loss, their world shrinking into scarcity. But the generous person lives in wide, open abundance, their world expanded with opportunities, relationships, and unexpected blessings. One businessman I knew made it his mission to give a portion of his profits to causes he cared about. In the beginning, people told him, that's unwise. You should keep everything if you want to grow. But he kept giving. His business flourished beyond what anyone predicted. When asked about his success, he smiled and said, generosity is not subtraction, it's multiplication. Every time I gave, the supply came back bigger. Generosity also heals hearts. A woman who had been deeply hurt in her past once shared with me how she overcame bitterness. She decided to practice generosity, not just with money, but with forgiveness. She chose to forgive those who wronged her, to release the debt they owed her emotionally. At first, it was painful, like giving away something she didn't want to part with. But over time, her heart became lighter. She discovered that forgiveness was a gift she gave herself as much as to others. Her life blossomed again, proving that generosity of spirit is as powerful as generosity of resources. It's important to understand that generosity doesn't have to be grand to be impactful. People often think giving must be extravagant, but sometimes the smallest gift carries the greatest power. A cup of water offered in kindness can mean more than a banquet given without love. The value of generosity is not measured in dollars, but in sincerity. When you live generously, you align yourself with the flow of divine supply. You step into a rhythm of giving and receiving that keeps abundance circulating in your life. It's like breathing. You inhale and exhale. If you only inhale and never exhale, you suffocate. Generosity is the exhale that keeps the cycle alive. So think about your own life. Where can you give? Who can you bless? What can you release? It might be money. It might be time. It might be a kind word. But whatever it is, don't underestimate its power. Because generosity doesn't just change the receiver. It transforms the giver. It enlarges your world, deepens your joy, and anchors you in the truth that divine supply is endless. And when you live that way, you don't just become rich. You become a source of richness for everyone you touch. Here's the truth. The formula is not complicated, it's not hidden, and it's not reserved for a chosen few. It is available to anyone who dares to believe, anyone who dares to trust, anyone who dares to live differently. Gratitude, faith, generosity. These are not just ideas. They are choices. And every choice you make writes the story of your wealth, your future, your legacy. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait until everything looks perfect. Don't wait until you have more. Because if you cannot be grateful now, if you cannot trust now, if you cannot give now, you never will. The door to abundance opens not tomorrow, not someday, but today, right here, right now. Say thank you today. Believe again today. Give something today. Do it while your hands are shaking. Do it while your heart is racing. Do it while the world tells you it makes no sense. Because the moment you take that step, you activate the flow of divine supply in your life. Repeat this with me in your heart. I am not lacking. I am not empty. I am connected to an infinite source that will never run dry. Say it until you feel it. Say it until you live it. Say it until everything in your life begins to reflect it. Because in the end, the formula is simple. Trust the source. Release the fear. Walk with gratitude. Live with faith. Give with open hands. And watch how heaven responds. The question is not whether divine supply is real. The question is, will you step into it? Your support means everything if this resonated with you. Please share and subscribe. And remember this. Wealth is not about how much you keep. It's about how much you flow. Thank you for being here. See you in the next one.